Welcome to the Property Podcast, the home of news and debate about building long-term wealth from property investment for beginners and experts alike. And now for your hosts. I keep asking if I can say real estate, but they tell me that's not how you guys do it over there. It's Rob and Rob.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Property Podcast, or as we like to call it, the PP. This week, Rob's back in London. Welcome, Rob. Good to have you home.
Thank you. Good to be home, sort of. Bloody freezing. Okay, so this week we're going to be taking a look at a piece of news that caught our attention, and then we're going to dive into our topic of the week, which is 7 newbie mistakes that can shatter your investment dreams. And if you stick around to the end, we're going to share our resource of the week, which this week is all about using a little browser add-on to get some super sneaky inside info about properties you're interested in.
Yeah, there's some good tips in the topic of the week, so make sure you take notes throughout that, because what we don't want you to do is shatter your investment dreams. So let's make sure you take notes, because there's some really good stuff coming up. But before we get there, we'd just like to mention again that we'd love your support in iTunes and the reviews. So if anybody leaves us a 5-star review there, we'll be more than happy to mention you in the show. We were sort of recording this before we've actually got the episode in iTunes, so we can't thank you yet, but we're sure there's many of you going to iTunes and leaving nice, kind, positive reviews. And if you can help us and leave those reviews, we'll get into the new and noteworthy section, which will really help the podcast come on and get found by other people. So we'd really appreciate your help.
Yep, and feed our egos as well, which is very important.
Absolutely.
So, Rob, we've not spoken much this week, so I don't really know what you've been up to. What's been keeping you busy?
Yeah, a really busy week at R&P Property, my company. We've got a property launching this week in Batley, which is just outside of Leeds.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been really busy with that, because we put a document together called the Big 50 Report, which is a due diligence document. Mm-hmm. So it's 50 questions we ask of every single investment. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of detail that goes into that and a lot of time. It's not something you can throw together in 5 minutes. So that's been going on. I'm visiting the site again personally tomorrow, so a bit of a road trip tomorrow, but any excuse to get on site, I do love it. I was actually in St Albans yesterday with a friend looking at a new build development there, so I spent my Sunday in hard hats and high vis, and I just can't help myself. Any excuse to look at property, I'm there, so I was doing that yesterday. And in between all that, I'm training for the London Marathon, so putting in some serious miles at the moment as it gets close to the actual date.
That's ridiculous. So how far are you up to with your training runs?
Not quite as far as it should be. I did 14 miles on Saturday, so I was reasonably happy with that. But it's quite hilly. I live out in Hertfordshire, so it's quite hilly where I am. So it's 14 hilly miles. So I kid myself into thinking that's harder than what other people are doing.
I'm sure that counts for more. You can always run to Leeds if you need to.
I'm not quite ultra-marathon ready. Yeah, maybe halfway.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we've not spoken this week, because you've been travelling, obviously, because last time we spoke you were in the Far East, and now you're back here in the UK.
Yeah, I'm glad you've been active for the both of us, because I've just been sitting on planes basically and getting lots of reading and listening done, which is great. But yeah, we're almost in the same city now. You're in Hertfordshire, I'm out in East London. And other than travelling, I've just been looking at schedules of works and getting quotes for a refurb I'm getting done up in Liverpool. I've been sorting out a blocked bath in one of my flats in London, which I was doing at Bangkok Airport, which is always good fun. And that's a good reason why we should all be more like you and outsource more of our maintenance, which is something we need to talk about in a future episode.
Definitely.
But that's it, really, just readjusting to London life.
And how is that readjustment going? Obviously, a slight temperature difference.
Yeah, apart from the 30-degree drop in temperature, everything's great.
Good. And how long are you back for?
I'm going to be round about for a month. I've got some travel around the UK because I'm speaking to some people for my other podcast and for the book I'm doing. Then I'm off to a conference in Berlin, and beyond that, not quite sure. A summer of Eastern Europe, but destination TBC. Maybe if any listeners have got tips for where I should be visiting, they can let us know.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds fun. Okay, so let's have a look at what's been capturing our attention this week, or what's been in the news. And it's nice to bring you a good news story.
Yeah.
In fact, 2. There's a couple of bits of pieces that have been in the news recently, which has shown positivity where house prices have been concerned. The first one was the Mortgage Advice Bureau, which has shown house prices rose 0.5% in February. Now, 0.5% doesn't sound a lot, but in 1 month, that's respectable. And prices in sort of 3 months preceding that were up 1.9%. 6% compared with the sort of preceding 3 months. So again, it's a good trend of positivity and house prices moving upwards. In relation to that, in the news today, because obviously we're not recording this live, or you're not hearing this live, the Daily Express on their front page has got house prices up £142 a day as values soar to a record high. So I don't know about you, Rob. Do you feel £142 richer?
I'm not sure about that, but no, it's nice to have a bit of a good news story. The other thing that I'd take from it is the figures are showing that activity in the market has risen for 7 months in a row as well. And I think activity is really important because prices can be anything, but if no one's buying or selling, then there's not a lot of point.
Exactly.
But I've got a bit of a sceptical nature about national figures because they conceal so much variation. Like if properties are up 50% in the south and down 50% in the north, and it's showing no difference. Definitely. But so I think it's worth keeping one eye on that and the other on the prices in your local market. And then at some point we should probably do a podcast about the arguments around what house prices should be, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who wouldn't think that house prices rising would be a good thing right now.
Oh, that would definitely get people talking. I think we should definitely record that podcast, definitely. I'm in complete agreement. I think it's great news, and it's nice after so many years of doom and gloom that we're seeing these positive stories come out. But I think the media is so guilty of this that it's either feast or famine. It's not just moderate, property prices are doing okay. That's not really as an exciting headline. Property prices have done nothing for the last 2 years, but they weren't as bad as people were saying. No growth, but certainly not the doom and gloom that people were predicting. And now they're not rocketing. I don't care what the headlines say, but it might be some slow, steady growth. But really, that's what we want. Boom and bust is going to happen. It's inevitable. But if we can have some slow, steady growth in between, then that's not so bad. Yeah, absolutely. I would not be complaining. Okay, shall we dive into our topic of the week then? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we're going to be talking this week about 7 newbie mistakes that can shatter your investment dreams. Not that we're being sensationalist or anything. Just like the headline we've just been criticising. Yeah, Daily Express, nothing like that. But in property, there are an amazing number of mistakes that you can make, some of them more serious than others. But we thought we'd focus on some big ones that can trip you up before you can even get started. And I think although the ones we're covering are big and they can really hold you back, the good news is that they're very easy to avoid in the first place if you're aware of what the pitfalls are. So, Rob, do you want to get started with the first one? Yeah, okay. So the first one we've put down is not starting with an end in mind or not giving yourself a goal. This relates to most things in life. If you don't give yourself a target, a goal or a finish line, then how do you judge yourself as being a success or not? It will also help you be a lot more focused on what you need to do. Because if you don't know your goal, then how can you start to formulate any plans or any other strategies or anything else like that? Yeah. So by having a goal, a target, something that you want to achieve further down the line, then the more successful you will be in property. So set yourself a goal. Don't be scared of setting a big goal. As long as if it's long term, then you're going to have a good chance of hitting it. If it's a long term goal, go big, go brave, and set a big juicy goal and then start working towards it. Yeah, absolutely. And that ties into our second point, which is the mistake of not putting together a plan or having a strategy. And so once you've got a goal, you need to have a plan that gets you there. And obviously, you don't know what's exactly going to happen. If it's a long-term goal, you don't know what's going to happen with house prices. You don't know what's going to happen in your life. But you can plot out a rough course and then make corrections as you go and just keep revising your plan every 6 months or so and see the progress you're making towards that big goal you set earlier. And I think the other thing about having a plan is that it can help keep you on track and stop you from getting distracted by the latest trends. Like you see people who are always kind of jumping from the hot new strategy to the next one, and you end up with no focus and just being all over the place. And so if you've got a plan in place, you can just evaluate every opportunity and go, okay, does this fit my plan? Does this get me closer to my goal? It's so true. An analogy I often use with investors is, if I was to jump in a car from my home now and drive all the way to Scotland and I had a destination in mind, say a hotel, I wouldn't just drive and hope I get there. I'd have a map or a plan or a route or a sat-nav, something to guide me. It's the same when you invest in property. You can't just set a goal and hope it arrives at some point. Yeah. You have to put that plan or strategy together. Absolutely. And talking of strategy, point number 3 strategy is don't use TV shows to build your strategy. Now, you've got to take credit for this one, Rob, because I've had a sneaky peek of your upcoming book, which is great, a really good book. But one of the points you talk about is the amount of people that use Property Ladder as a template of how to invest in property.
Yeah.
That is not how to, well, for most people, that is not how you should be going about investing in property. Now, I would struggle to change anything more than a light bulb in a property. That's about my limit. I'm not going to start refurbing property. It's not my skill set. It's not my expertise. So I'm not going to touch it. If you're in a profession that has a skill set that matches that, then great. If you're a carpenter or a plasterer, or you can do a lot of that, then maybe that should be a strategy for you. But if you have no experience of building or renovating, then maybe that shouldn't be the first strategy you jump to. Equally, the auction show, Homes Under the Hammer.
Yeah.
Homes Under the Hammer, great show, love to watch it, but it doesn't mean that you suddenly should start out investing in auction properties. It might be a good strategy, but don't just follow the TV programs, because they do it all in half an hour.
Yeah.
It's not that easy in real life. So avoid using TV shows as your plan, your strategy.
Yeah, totally. And I'd even extend that and say, don't just try and lift your strategy from anyone. Like, TV shows are particularly damaging because they want to have a narrative, and there's going to be lots of complication that are missed out. But just because someone else is telling you that they've made a success of doing things a certain way doesn't mean that you have to. Like you say, if you're just not skilled in doing refurbs or anything, even if someone tells you that he's made loads of money sort of doing properties up and flipping them, it's just not going to work for you. You've got to find an approach that suits your skills and your temperament.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, the next point then is not working with professionals. And this is something where I'm going to hold my hands up and say that I've really struggled with letting go of a lot of things, because I'm a total control freak, and I know that you're way further ahead of me in this regard. But I'm always wanting to, if I had my way, I'd be finding the tenants myself, reference checking them myself, reading through all the terms and conditions of the different mortgages to choose which one to get. At one point I would have been doing the conveyancing myself if I could have done. But it's just trying to do everything yourself and not work with professionals. But a while ago, I started making a real effort to what I call be the CEO. So employ experts in each area who can do a far better job than I can, while I focus on what I'm best at. And since I've done that, my life has got a hell of a lot better. And I'm not a totally reformed character. I do tend to like to get in, meddle around in things too much, but I'm getting there. And I think as a newcomer to property, that's even more important to employ professionals, because you don't know what you don't know. So if you don't get advice from an expert on legal matters, on your mortgage or on tenancy or whatever, you could be making all kinds of mistakes that can come back and bite you later without you having a clue that you're making these mistakes in the first place. So if you try and do everything yourself, you're going to possibly make mistakes, and also your progress is just going to be so much slower because you're trying to duplicate knowledge that other people have already got, and you don't have to pay them that much money to get access to that knowledge and use it for yourself.
I'm really passionate about this, as you've already sort of pointed out. And the thing I'd add to that is also value your time.
Yeah.
Because if you could go and look for a mortgage product, you could spend a day researching all the deals out there. You could submit the application forms all yourself and spend the best part of a day and a half doing that. Or you could pay a mortgage broker to go and do it all for you and get it all wrapped up within an hour.
Yeah.
And they already know what the best products are. And in fact, they probably still do a better job. Whereas, what's your time worth? If you've given up a day and a half, could you have done something better with that time? It's, yes, use professionals because they know a little bit more in each subject than you do, but also they can do it a lot more quickly than you would do as well. So it's valuing your time and using their knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Our next point is buy below market value or not buying below market value, because it's one of the mistakes that newbie investors make. Now, if you're going to buy a car, the first price somebody gives you, you wouldn't say, yes, okay, I'll take it. Well, I hope you wouldn't anyway. You should apply the same rules with property. There's negotiation there. Now, it's one of the beautiful things about property is that you can negotiate and you can find yourself a deal. Now, an ISA, you can't walk into the bank and they say, well, we'll give you 3%. you can't say call it 4, and then try and meet them halfway. It's not going to happen. But with property, there is room for maneuver. And if you know what you're doing, build a network, do your research, then you can find below market value property. Now, there are obviously companies like mine that do it as well, but you can do it yourself. Obviously, I'm going to refer back to work with professionals to the point before, but it's not like we've got secrets and you can't do it yourself if you really wanted to. Whether you work with a professional or not, you really, really should buy below market value, because it's often said that money's not made when you sell your property, it's when you buy it.
Yeah.
Because you've got to make sure you buy the right property in the right place at the right price.
Yeah. And as well as building in your equity at the start, it's got big implications in terms of being able to how much money you end up tied in to a property. And if you end up with all your money tied up in one deal and you can't move on to the next one, you're going to struggle to build up a portfolio that gets you to where you need to be. Okay, so the next point is not doing enough research. Now, this is one that I cannot be accused of. I've got a massive spreadsheet fetish and I research the hell out of everything. So, but a big newbie mistake is not doing enough research. And like Rob, I know that even though your job is basically advising newcomers to property and getting them on the right track, you don't just tell them what to do, you give them a heap of material to read through, and you insist that they do a lot of research off their own back, rather than just taking your word for it. And that's really important, because a property is probably the highest value thing you'll ever buy, unless you're buying very cheap houses and you've got a taste for very expensive cars. So it's not something that you want to buy on a whim or on one person's opinion. And there's just no end to the kind of stuff you can research in property. I mean, you should be researching whether a particular type of investment is suited to your goals and your personality. You should be researching the prospects for a particular area, and then get down to researching individual deals themselves. And each of those could be a whole episode of the podcast in itself and more. But you've got to be doing the research, because otherwise you can be making very, very expensive mistakes, which you can get out of, but it's going to cost you and it's going to slow you down. But then, having said that, there's then the flip side, which is when you get stuck in research and never actually get around to doing anything. And that's, I know, is our final point.
Yeah, there's a balance. There's reading a marketing brochure is not research, but what you can do is you can create a situation where it's called analysis paralysis. So analysis paralysis is where you give yourself so much data and overwhelm yourself with so many choices that you actually frighten off from making a decision one way or another. Now, this is not to say, to invalidate the last point, research is so important, and I'm a massive believer in that. And as Rob pointed out, the Big 50 report I mentioned earlier, that's not your research, that's a platform for our investors to go away and research our research, and then formulate their own decisions and come to their own conclusions that, yes, this is right for me, or no, it isn't. But you've got to be careful that you don't go OTT, over the top, and keep researching, keep giving yourself plentiful choices, overwhelm yourself with so many different options that you never make any progress at all. Because actually, the biggest mistake I feel that you can make in property investment is not investing at all. Because if you don't, what are you going to do longer term to create wealth for yourself? I mean, the pension crisis is really dull, but it's there. It's not going away. I'm sure that 99% of the people listening to this podcast, if they haven't already built up a property portfolio, if they're relying on the pension, they're probably not going to be able to maintain the lifestyle they live now. I know that's a huge percentage, but if you're listening to this, and you're not investing in property, and you're relying on a pension, stop and think, will this be enough? Don't just hope that when you retire, your financial advisor is going to say, yes, it's going to be fine, don't worry. Find out now. And if it isn't, do something about it. Don't just wait for something to come along and sort itself out for you. It's not going to happen. So analysis paralysis relates to that, because if you do have the good intention of doing something and get overwhelmed, then and you don't make any decisions or make any progress whatsoever, that's actually worse than not doing anything at all.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think that's the thing. You can make a ton of mistakes when you buy a property, but at least you've bought it, and as long as you haven't royally screwed it up, you're going to be making some money. There's going to be some appreciation, and so, it might not be totally optimal, but you're going to be further ahead than if you'd done nothing at all. And if you think about things too much, you can talk yourself out of anything. There are you can find a million reasons not to do stuff because things might go wrong, and there comes a point where you just need to go, okay, I'm overthinking this. And I think that's also very easy to do with the media being the way it is. Like we were talking about the Daily Express earlier with house prices suddenly rocketing, but then tomorrow I'm sure they'll be crashing and there'll be lots of bad news around the corner. And so if you buy into that too much and get carried away by the media and their horror stories, and even just the horror stories of people down the pub who just like, oh yeah, I bought a property, it's nothing but hassle, blah blah blah, you're just going to psych yourself out and end up doing nothing. So that's not a pattern you want to fall into.
I completely agree. Okay, so that's our 7 newbie mistakes that can shatter your investment dreams. So I hope you found that useful and you've taken some notes and take action from them. But we're going to look at our resource of the week now. Now, last week, there was a book that I recommended called The Richest Man in Babylon, and Rob hadn't read the book, and we talked a little about it and why I recommend that Rob and everyone else goes out and buys and reads that book. This week, we're looking at a resource called Property Bee. Now, Property Bee I'm aware of, but I don't personally use. So, Rob, can you talk us through why we're looking at this week and how you use it and why it's useful?
Yeah, of course. It's Property Bee is a browser plugin for Firefox, which I can tell everyone stop listening already because that sounds really geeky. But it's just a little add-on that you install if you use the Firefox browser, and it basically means that when you're looking at Rightmove, it gives you some extra information about what's happened historically with each property that you wouldn't know if you were just looking at Rightmove without Property Bee. So basically, when you look at any given property in Rightmove, it adds this extra little panel that shows you what's happened historically with the price. So it'll say on the 5th of January it was first added, on the 1st of February the price was dropped by £10,000, and then on this date it went under offer, on this date it's become available again. And that's really, really useful information because it means rather than just kind of looking at how a property is being marketed now, it's kind of telling you the backstory. And what that means is that you can kind of get a sense that, okay, if a property's been sitting there for months and it's gone under offer and then it's come back on again and they've just dropped the price by 10 grand, and that's telling you that they're likely to be wanting to shift it and having some trouble. And that means that you can go in there and maybe make a low offer, or if you kind of assure them that you'll be able to complete, then they might give you a bit of leeway on the price. And it just means that if you can see through any spin that the agent is giving you, because they might imply that it's like a really hot competition for properties. Oh, well, I know that's been sitting there for months. And it's just, information is power. And it's not like it gives you any kind of amazing super insight that will tell you exactly what to do. But it does mean that rather than going in blind to a viewing, it kind of gives you a little bit of backstory, which you might be able to use as leverage. And it's so easy to get because once you've installed this plugin, it just comes up automatically every time you look on Rightmove, and you don't have to do anything. So I've had it for such a long time, I'd kind of forgotten that it wasn't a built-in part of Rightmove, and it's really useful.
And it's free?
And it is completely free. And at the moment, it's being maintained by, I think it's by the people who do net house prices, and it's not been updated for a long time, but it's still working, and I think there are some big plans in the works for it. But it's definitely worth installing because information is power, and so you might as well grab any extra bit of information you can.
Yeah, that sounds like a super tool. I completely agree. When it comes to negotiation, information is the power. You know, it really is. Okay, wow, we've been busy, haven't we? Yeah,
well, I think that's another really solid episode, and hopefully we've given people some stuff to think about. And if we have, again, please go onto iTunes and review the podcast. If you can give us a 5-star review, we will read it out and thank you on the next episode. And it'll help us get into new and noteworthy, which means that we can slap ourselves on the back and we can reach more people as well. And people can sign up for our mailing list as well, can't they?
They certainly can. They can jump on thepropertypodcast.com. Just pop your email in there and we'll email you every episode that comes out so you never miss one.
Fantastic.
Okay, Rob, well, that's us for another week. That went really quick.
Yeah, it flew by. And so next week we're going to be talking about 5 books that every property investor should read is our topic for next week. And I know you can fill that about 5 times over on your own, so I hope I get a word in.
I know I'm a massive bookworm, but I really believe that reading the right books can really set you up. What'll make it interesting is there'll be some books that are directly linked to property, but also some alternative books that may not be directly property-related books, but that you can learn a lot of lessons from and implement them to property investment. Now, we've said 5 books, but by the time we record it might be more like 27. We'll see how we go.
We'll see how it goes. All right, looking forward to it.
Super. Thanks, Rob.
Right, see you next week.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Property Podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes and join the mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.